Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, always properly caffeinated, exclusively musically themed weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and its never boring off seasons. I'm Eric Hansen, chilling here in South Bend and living my best life. He's Charles James, sitting in LaPorte, living the Recruitapalooza life. And together we're the new content creators at blueandgold.com and Blue and Gold Illustrated, and hopefully part of the company pickleball team. On tonight's show, we'll talk about a rising star in Notre Dame's offensive line who suddenly sidelined and interrupted a relatively quiet offseason for the Irish. We'll also talk about the path forward without Charles Jagusah for however long that happens to be. Recruiting, we've got plenty of that too, plus your comments, quips, questions, maybe even bribes. So start filling up the question portal. This is
All right. Welcome in, everybody. I'm glad you still found us. Today, we officially changed the name of our YouTube channel. The logos are temporary, but the name change is permanent. The official channel name is now Notre Dame Football with Eric Hansen and Charles James. And our YouTube handle is Hansen and James. What does that mean for you? Hopefully nothing. Our content should still be served to you in the way it already was, but if you're ever searching for us over here on YouTube, make sure you include Notre Dame Football and either of our names, and this channel should show up for you. As we've mentioned previously, we're not planning to drastically change the content we bring you, but we may include some of our Blue and Gold teammates from time to time. So make sure you're subscribed to us here on this channel. It helps us out as we continue to grow. The likes and comments matter too, so hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're commenting, whether you're live or watching us on replay. We want to hear from you, and we appreciate we have a lively chat already here tonight from Scott, Swan, Irish fan, Jeff, Justin. Appreciate the conversation, fellas. If you haven't checked out our new website home yet, go to blueandgold.com. We have so much coverage over there with a talented and deep team that I'm confident you'll find something that you're interested in. All right, Eric, let's get rolling.
Well, it's a good thing my last name isn't Bartles, or we might have a copyright lawsuit coming up with our handle. So tonight, our opening drive is all about what a lot of Notre Dame fans kind of dread, that offseason gut punch. But there's a path forward. So off-season injuries are going to happen. This one stings a little bit more because there's the presumption that it was self-inflicted. So on Saturday in Wyoming, Notre Dame redshirt sophomore offensive guard Charles Jagusah suffered a broken left humerus, that's the upper bone in the arm, in a accident involving a UTV, a utility terrain vehicle, which is a little bit different from an ATV. We got some of the details. He had surgery for it. He's going to be back in South Bend this week, be re-examined. We'll probably get a recovery timeline at some point. I know a lot of people have been guessing about that. I think it's reasonable to assume that he will not be ready to go at the start of the season. So this isn't just a projected starter. This is a guy with some All-America potential, despite the fact he's only played in 3 games in 2 seasons, again, because of injuries, but none that was quite this variety. So that's where we're going to start tonight. So the natural move for me is that Notre Dame would slide 6'8", 328-pound redshirt sophomore Sullivan Absher into the right guard spot. Sullivan is really kind of the number one option at left guard, backup option at left guard center, and right guard. Tyler, is there any other move or series of moves that could or should be considered?
I think you could consider some other moves. I think Absher in Jagusah's place makes the most sense. He was next up at a number of positions, so I think this opens the door for him. But I think the thing that would be the most intriguing to me, it would sort of hinge on one person, that'd be Kirby Lambert. If he was ready to play left tackle, you can put him there, move Anthony Knapp to center, push Ashton Craig to right guard. Or I guess you could move Knapp to guard and keep Craig at center if you want less movement. That would be the only other alternative that makes sense to me. I mean, certainly you could just put Lambert in at guard if you felt confident that he could play guard. Or maybe there's other guards that rise to the occasion. Joe Otting could be a candidate there. Will Black, the true freshman, could be a candidate there. But I think Absher makes the most sense. But as we've seen, Joe Rudolph is not afraid to move guys around and make changes. So I don't think you can rule anything out because of his willingness and faith in his ability to get guys ready, even if they maybe haven't had a lot of experience in a certain role.
Yeah, Sullivan Absher is a really valuable guy to have on your team. He could play tackle as well. The thing about it is, does the calculus involve when Jagusah is back? Let's say it's the end of September or the end of October or halfway through November. Does that work into your calculation on how many people should be moved in this shuffle to get the best 5 on the field?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say. I have so much trust in Joe Rudolph based off of last season that whatever he wants to do is what I believe in. I think what's most important, and it was the same last offseason when Jagusah got hurt in preseason camp, is you have to have someone ready for a season opener that's not going to be easy. And so I think because of the opener being at Miami, you need to get your best option out there, regardless if he's the youngest guy or he's the oldest guy. I think that's what Notre Dame needs to do and how Joe Rudolph will likely handle it.
Do you see any scenario where Will Black is in that equation, the freshman 5-star that arrived in June?
He could be. I just don't. I'm not sure that guard's not the best fit for him.
Well, I mean, could he be a tackle and you kick Anthony Knapp inside?
I suppose you could, if you feel like he can give you what you need, and he's better at left tackle than you felt like Sullivan Absher or someone else would be at right guard. I think Black is the most. I mean, I feel like he needs to be a tackle. I think he's not tapping into his full potential if he's being shifted down into guard early in his career. So I think if Will Black shows up and he's like, you know what, he's the best left tackle we have on campus right now already, then I think he could make that move. And I mean, it would be that different if, like I was arguing, that maybe Kirby Lambert could be that. So yeah, I mean, if Black is that guy, I think you do it, even though it's risky. But Joe Rudolph isn't afraid to make risks.
Right. The feedback that I've gotten from Will Black being on campus for the first few weeks is just how well he moves. That he looks every bit a 5-star from movement, from athleticism, and also a very quick learner. Where I think there has some proving to be done in training camp would be what happens when Boubacar Traore lines up over him. Is he ready to deal with elite pass rushers? Because he didn't see a lot of those in the Connecticut prep school league. I can't remember what it's exactly called, but it's a prep school league. I mean, there's good players in that league, but not elite pass rushers. And the one thing I noticed when I was looking at Pro Football Focus's top 50 players for 2025, 2 that were in the top half of that top 50 were edge players from Miami and Texas A&M. So Notre Dame's going to see some elite pass rushers really early. Maybe Will Black is an option later in the season if Charles Jagusah's recovery timeline becomes elongated. So the next thing I wanted to ask you was kind of in connection with a column I wrote this morning about what leadership looks like. Could this adversity turn out to have a galvanizing effect on Notre Dame, at least temporarily, even losing somebody as good as Charles Jagusah? And I mention that because it felt like in a lot of instances last year when there was a starter loss, Notre Dame really pulled together and got really great production out of a lot of their backups. It wasn't just the 2 offensive linemen. It was also some people elsewhere in the lineup on both offense and defense.
Yeah, I don't know that this injury specifically to Jagusah is any more galvanizing than any other injuries to players who would be expected to play a role. I mean, his injury last year, he was projected to be the starting left tackle when he got hurt. I don't know that we were crediting that injury as galvanizing the team to coming together. But I do think the way the whole season went, it was a great example of how players need to be ready and need to step up. And so I think this sort of, unfortunately, sort of continues that message. And you should have plenty of guys buying in, and probably guys beyond Sullivan Absher who are fired up like, hey, I have another opportunity here. Yes, they're bummed for Charles Jagusah, but this is a door opening for someone, and I want to put myself in position to be that someone who could take advantage of it.
So just kind of sticking on the leadership theme for a minute. I mean, history tells us it does matter for the good in 2012, 2018, 2020, and 2024 in particular, and even 2015 when Notre Dame lost its starting quarterback in the second game of the season. Deshaun Kaiser came in for Malik Zaire, and they were probably a better team with Deshaun Kaiser. Not so good leadership in 2011, 2014, and 2016 in particular. Do you think Notre Dame has strong player leaders on this team, and why or why not?
I do think Notre Dame does. However, leadership, in my opinion, is best gauged when proven. I think a lot of those teams that we're pointing to as examples of having good leaders, if they had poor seasons, would we have said, like, I think there's a lot of causation there that I don't know how you can separate it. I think a lot of times you think you have good leadership going into a season, and then things go wrong. Then you sort of realize, oh, maybe we actually didn't have good leaders, and that was what we were missing, and we didn't have a sense for that. I'm sure there are probably people within the program that maybe sometimes can have that sense for that, but also want to maybe not believe that, or maybe too optimistically believe that, hey, these guys can step up as leaders. I think there are plenty of guys on Notre Dame's roster who have played last season, learned those lessons from last season, and can instill them into younger players. And that's why I would believe that Notre Dame is in a position to have a good leadership step up this season and lead them to where they want to go. What do you think, Eric?
I agree. I do think there's some really good leaders potentially on this team. And as I mentioned in my column today, you really find out who your leaders are when you get a few puffs of adversity. That's when they really show up. I think everybody else can kind of organize people and send the group texts, and those are all important things, and do the extra film work and the extra weight room work. But pulling the team together when there's adversity, like Howard Cross was a big leader last year after the Northern Illinois loss, for instance. And I also think it comes from the coaching staff. I think Marcus Freeman and a lot of these assistant coaches, you think about exemplary leaders. And when you think about 2014 and 2016 in particular, Brian Vigorder was the defensive coordinator at the start of both those seasons. He got fired during the 2016 season. And I think that carried down to the team. I also think Brian Kelly got a little complacent and allowed cultural rot on that team. We had Andrew Hendricks. I did a story with Andrew Hendricks, and we've had him on the podcast before. And he talked about how guys were skipping team runs, guys were skipping weight room stuff, and nobody was holding them accountable. Now, they should have been holding themselves accountable, but when your coaches don't care, it's easy to let that happen. So that's kind of my thought on that. The last thing that I wanted to get to before we got to the question portal, and there looks like there's some good ones in there, is Jack Sobel did a column where I felt like he elevated the column because he got into, okay, we're in a new era with rev share and with NIL, and contractually there may be something in there where there's some consequence for Charles Jagusah or somebody else that has that kind of injury where it's non-football related. But when I looked at the response on social media, on our loose emoji message board, there were people that were pretty hard on, what is basically a redshirt sophomore in college. do we look at these guys different? Should we look at them different? The fact that they're highly paid players now instead of just a kid on a scholarship.
I think people do. I don't to as great of, like, it's still different. Just because they're receiving money doesn't mean that they're the same as professional athletes. They're still college students. They're still young men. And like I think the money doesn't mean that college football fans have ownership over these players. The money they're making is a reflection of the hard work that they put their body through year round. And these guys, it is year round. They're on campus almost all year long. I'm open for activities being outlined in contracts as off limits, but I don't know that I'm going to get mad at a kid for doing what I believe to be a legal recreational activity in his limited time off, unless he was prohibited from doing so prior to that. I think the harshness of the criticism should be informed by how much we know about the situation. And I don't know that we know enough in terms of, did Charles Jagusah do something reckless to create the injury? I know some people are arguing that riding a UTV in its own right is reckless, but if there were other people doing it, do they get punished too, even though they didn't get hurt? I think it's a bit of a slippery slope if you want to be so judgmental or harsh to college student athletes just because they're getting some revenue from the sport that they play at the college level. So I don't know. It's not like, and also these things are in NFL contracts, but those contracts are negotiated. And I don't know to what extent these contracts that are being proposed are being allowed to be negotiated by players right now. And like, are they all one size fits all? Are they different? Does someone have more sway in terms of the outlining of activities they can do in the off season versus, obviously there's going to be some differences in terms of money, but are there other things that are negotiable as well?
Yeah, it'll be interesting if college sports eventually gets to that collective bargaining stage. I think then we'll see those kinds of clauses and contracts. For me, I remember I had an uncle years ago. We used to go visit him in Florida, and he was a big Cubs fan, and he would cut out of the newspaper the salaries of everybody on the Cubs team. And if somebody made an error, he would look at that. He would hold this in his hand during the games, and he would decide how mad he was going to get based on how much that player was making. But I, again, for me, what I'm really curious to see is the context from what this happened, but how Charles Jagusah responds to it, how he gets up from this, how the team responds to it. I think that's the most important part at this point. But again, context will tell us a lot in terms of whether he was being irresponsible. He could have been, there may have been a very noble reason he was in a UTV. Okay.
Yeah, I think, I just think, like, the money thing is interesting because I just think it has more to do with player or fans are passionate about their teams. That's why people get upset or not upset, whether or not they're making more money or not. And they get upset with us.
I think some people are holding them to higher standard. I mean, I saw those comments a lot about, hey, they're making, lots of money now. I did see a few of those comments. I don't know that that was the predominant thought,
right?
But I did see those.
Yeah, I guess I would be curious if, like, do they really have a different opinion 3 years ago or whenever? I don't know. I think that might be an excuse to feel like you have a right to be more angry at a kid, potentially. But I don't know. We'll see. And obviously, everyone's going to, regardless of what we think, probably going to react how they want to as it relates to their emotions with this kind of thing. No, I mean, no one's ever gotten less angry at me because I make less money than they think I should. So I don't know how much that plays a role.
Sounds good. Are we ready to head to the question portal?
All right. Yes. Let's start with Charles Johnson. Isn't it better to just let Sully play right guard as opposed to moving established starters around, which may create more than one positional development on the offensive line?
Because I think Sullivan is is a really good plug and play player, I would agree. I think if you were weakening that position by putting him in there and there was, two really good tackles and one of them could play guard, let's say Garby Lambert was as good at playing tackle as he looks getting off the bus. And we know that Anthony Knapp can play inside. In fact, Joe Rudolph has said maybe that might be his best long-term position is playing inside. But he's Notre Dame's best left tackle option right now. But especially that Jagusah, that we think he's going to be back at some point in the season, at least right now, I think the Sullivan option is the best one. At least that's where I would start.
Yeah, I agree. As we talked about a little bit earlier, it does make the most sense to have the least amount of change, because even though there are experienced guys, it's like not a lot of these guys were playing in these same positions last year, so they do, or playing together, and so I think the opportunity to create chemistry is lessened by moving more guys around that maybe those guys were able to build throughout the spring and summer. All right. Klontar says Wagner at left tackle, maybe. What do you think about that?
He seems to really like right tackle, and Marcus Freeman seems very comfortable with and Joe Rudolph with Anthony Knapp at left tackle. And in talking to the linemen themselves and Joe Rudolph, I talked to them last year, ironically, about Jagusah. I said, what's harder, moving from right to left, or moving from guard to tackle or tackle to guard? And Jagusah actually felt like the right-left thing was a bigger deal than playing inside and outside, at least for him. And so if Wagner is comfortable at right tackle and playing at a high level, he was Notre Dame's highest-rated starter last year by Pro Football Focus, I would leave him there. In talking with Bob Morton, former Notre Dame offensive lineman who does a lot of YouTube work with Tyler and I, he just really likes Anthony Knapp's footwork. And as Anthony Knapp becomes a bigger, stronger version of himself, that footwork's going to show up even better. So I think it's a great question, but I would leave them alone.
Yeah, I think if there was that much trust in Wagner's ability to play left tackle, he would have already been there. And they clearly like him on the right side more. So I don't know that there's a belief that that makes it. I think some people suggest it because they think, well, wouldn't it be easier if Will Black or Garby Lambert could fill in at right tackle than left tackle? And I'm not sure that it's that significantly different. Certainly that's the blind side of either of Notre Dame's potential starting quarterbacks, but I don't think it's as I think there's more balance between the two tackles given the way the game has evolved than you're doing like seven-step play action passes where the quarterback has no idea the pass rusher's coming from his left. So I think that Notre Dame feels confident with Wagner at right tackle. I'd be a bit surprised, given the comments that we've heard from Joe Rudolph in the past, if Notre Dame switched sides in order to make that easier for a future right tackle. I did see a comment in here. I think it was from Jeff Stevens. Yeah, I would want experience at left tackle to protect the blind side of Carr. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, if the experience is the best player, let's say Rocco came back and he was going to play right guard. So then you were choosing between Jagusah and Anthony Knapp. Now, Anthony Knapp has more experience, even though he's the younger player. Which of those two would you put at left tackle, Tyler?
Yeah, probably.
That's the question.
Yeah, probably Jagusah, even though I would probably argue that Jagusah would beat out Rocco Spindler or whatever. Yeah. Like, I think, like, because if you're making me say who's the better left tackle, I'd say, well, who's the better right guard too? But yeah, taking that in a vacuum, yes, I would probably be comfortable with putting Jagusah in there over Anthony Knapp, despite him having less starts. I do think the experience of Knapp is important, and I think that's a big part of why Notre Dame feels confident in him moving forward, because he learned so much as such a young guy who was thrown in such a tough position that he has so much room left to grow, that Notre Dame believes it can sort of tap into that moving forward.
Right. He really processed the difficult lessons and turned them into, and again, I mean, he started 15 games last year. That's a lot. I mean, that's never been done because Notre Dame's never played 15 games in a season, but there's been very few guys even start a full season at left tackle, and Anthony Knapp set that record last year and would have set it just even if he just played 13.
Jeff Stevens says, is Absher's PFF high rating an artifact due to the low number of snaps?
I'm not sure the context of the word artifact, so that I would have to go get my source here. But I think artificial.
I'm guessing it just means it's artificial. That's how I interpreted it.
Artifact, I thought, was something that goes in a museum, but maybe it's both. I think it's deceptive because of the low sample size. So he had 90 snaps last year, and not a lot of those were in high stress situations. And yet there's something to be said for doing your job no matter what the circumstances are. He had a slightly better PFF season score than did Emil Wagner, who played 10 times the amount of snaps and played in a lot more stressful situations. Absher would have been, I think he was number 5 overall on offense and number 1 among offensive linemen, starters, and reserves. The thing that I really like, which I didn't think would be skewed, Jeff, is the fact that he was really good at both pass blocking and run blocking. I think there's something to be taken in that small sample size there. In terms of the actual number, yes, I do think that was probably artificially inflated a little bit by circumstance.
Yeah, I would. I hadn't even looked at his PFF rating. I don't know that it means a lot. I would be curious, like, if PFF graders were honest with themselves, are they being as harsh in the fourth quarter of a blowout with their grades as they would be in the first quarter?
Well, that's
of
a good question. Next time we have one of them on, because
a close game. I mean, I'm sure they would say they want to be, but I think it'd be natural to be like, okay, let me get this over with. These plays don't really matter. I mean, I usually, when I do like some film analysis, I don't even spend any time on the backups. At least for what I'm working on, I'll obviously watch it, but I'm not going to include that necessarily in numbers that I'm putting together and stuff like that. So I would wonder if there was inflated by that as well. That's not to say that Sullivan Absher can't be a good player and didn't show some good things in backup reps.
Right, and the other backups didn't have his kind of numbers either.
Sure. So I think that I wouldn't concern myself too much with that, and we'll see what he looks like in preseason camp and give you our take on it, and we'll see which what you trust more.
What I can tell you, Jeff, too, is that last August, when Pendleton and Knapp overtook the left side of that offensive line, Absher was in that conversation at both of those positions. They kind of threw him in there to compete, and he did well. He just didn't end up at the top of the depth chart.
All right. Sorry if I seem distracted. There's been a spider crawling around on my backlight here that I have been trying to corral without knocking over the light or making any loud commotion. I think I successfully killed it. It was a very tiny one, but it was just bugging me. So if my eyes were wandering, that's what was going on. So
Unintended.
I apologize. Okay. Kevin Garber says, with player payouts now, shouldn't universities have players sign contracts that have clauses that limit outside activities like the NFL?
I think when they get to collective bargaining, they probably will do that. I don't know that they could be successful at doing that now. What do you think about that, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I think the more you get into that, I would be curious now. I don't know. I think the more you do with that, it seems to me the easier you are to making it in terms of players being arguing that they're employees rather than student athletes being shared with revenue. So I think that's a slippery slope that maybe schools might not want to go down because of that. Now, I don't know. I'm not a legal expert by any means, so maybe they're not worried about that. I think if schools can get away with that without fear of sort of repercussion, I would imagine they would want to do that to protect their assets. But I'm not sure how willing players would be and what the pushback would be to that from a legal standpoint as well. All right. Jeff Stevens has another one. Botello down and Jagusah down. Wonder who will be back first.
I believe that the timeline for Botello is October, or that's the latest projection. I'm going to say Botello would be back first. That would be my projection.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair guess. But I think we're just guessing. I don't really know what we need to know more.
There's a big. I mean, was Jagusah's fracture hairline fracture? Was it a compound fracture? Those are some of the details we don't know yet.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think how soon is he able to start rehabbing it? Does Notre Dame like the surgery that was done? Did the Notre Dame doctors approve of what was done to him previously? I don't. There's a lot of things that could have happened with him not being on campus when this happened that maybe are variables in the process of trying to figure out when he could return. So I think that we'll just sort of wait and see. Botello, I think, showed with his knee recovery previously that he, like, if there's a way to fast track himself, he's going to find it. Now, maybe that put him in a bad position and ended up leading him to another injury. But I think we've seen from him that he is going to fight like hell to get back on the football field. And so I wouldn't want to bet against him in this hypothetical race to get back to the field with him and Charles Jagusah. All right, Mike DeVoy, does the House settlement allow for contracts like this and schools withholding money for contract violations?
I don't think it addressed that. This was about revenue share and back pay for NIL. I mean, there were players that have moved on that got money from this House settlement. I don't think, and certainly roster limits was addressed in this as well, but I don't think that aspect was addressed whatsoever. I think that's something that's going to evolve as we go into the next few years.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the settlement, because it's a lot of pages, right? Isn't it? So there could be something in there that I don't know about it. So
it is a lot of pages, but I think there were some national writers that did a really good job of summarizing it for us, and I don't remember reading anything about that. I don't know why that would have come up as a legal challenge that would have needed to be addressed in that settlement.
All right. I think that's it for questions, Eric.
Okay.
At least for now. If you guys have more questions, obviously feel free to send them in through the show.
All right. So rating the Irish players. So Jack Sobel, our new teammate, gave us a homework assignment, and he wanted to know who we thought were the 25 most important players. So this isn't the 25 best players or most talented necessarily. And there were all kinds of parameters that went with this, including, who's next on the depth chart, positional value, and stuff like that. So we turn those in. We're going to run the collective list and probably our individual votes too before training camp starts at the end of July. Tyler, what did you think of that exercise? What was the hardest part of putting together that top 25 list?
Yeah, it's I've done some version of this for many years now. Typically, Douglas Farmer was doing it for NBC Sports. I think Keith Arnold before him, some version of it, and other people have done different things throughout the year. And Jack has sort of leaned on the important in terms of how it fits within the rest of your team. So that brought in more questions in terms of how you figure out where to slate someone, like particularly how deep to go at positions is something that I get challenged with, like, is the fourth best receiver more valuable than the third best running back? And obviously in a vacuum, you could say like for instance, like if you're a GM, like how would you give more money to that person versus this person? But also like, okay, if does Notre Dame just have a lot of good receivers or do they not? So does that make that receiver more valuable or less valuable? The offensive line, like I feel like is a very important position. So do I have to always include all 5 starters in my top 25? I think it's hard to exclude any. How do you include specialists? That's always a challenge for me. And do you hedge any bets in case backups are needed? So if I believe CJ Carr is the starter, for instance, do I hedge my bet and put Kenny Minchie in there just in case he beats out CJ Carr? So those are the things that I try to answer while going through the process. What did you think was the most difficult part?
For me, it was the calculus of the second stringer, how this played on the depth chart, for example, without giving too much away. Eli Reardon was a lot higher on that list than if you just, because I also did the top 25, best players, just didn't factor in those other factors. And Eli wasn't as high, but because I think right now there's a big gap between one and everybody else on the tight end room, he gets a bump. I think the quarterback gets a bump because of positional value. I don't think, with 4 game reps last year, either of those guys would be way high on the list, although I have high hopes for both of them. So that kind of calculus was different. Then getting the list just to 25, I ended up doing a column for Tuesday morning, for tomorrow morning, on 10 wild cards that didn't make my top 25, because those kind of guys do affect whether you get to the playoff and whether you win playoff games. And we saw that time and again during the playoff run. So I picked out not the 26 through 35 necessarily, but really intriguing guys to keep an eye on during camp and as we get into the season. So that was kind of fun to do, but my head hurt a little bit. I felt like I was back in calculus class.
Yeah. You have to get comfortable in leaving guys off the list that you're like, really, am I really not going to include them? Because it's so hard. With 25 is obviously a nice number to do, and top 25s are a big thing in college sports. But in terms of like impacting a college football team in a season, the list obviously goes well beyond 25, and meaningful
especially
impacts.
The way Notre Dame plays rotations.
Right.
I mean, Notre Dame's got a deeper rotation, a lot of positions than most teams.
Yeah. I mean, there's positions where it's like, okay, I'm not going to include a 4th linebacker because it's like, can we include 4 linebackers? But they have 4 good linebackers. So it's hard to make that choice when you're going through the list with the cutoff at 25.
And like safety, once you get past Adon Schuler, you're like, boy, there's a whole bunch of these guys. Which one would I pick? Because if one of them got injured, there's a whole bunch of other ones that are pretty good.
Yeah, I copped out there not to give too much away, and you'll see more from these lists in the combined blue and gold list as Jack puts that together throughout the month. But I just didn't even include another safety because I was like, I think they're all going to have an impact, but I don't know that any one is going to impact more than the others beyond Adon Schuler. So, or not all.
Who was the one that I have a football crush on that I wanted to get in the top 25, and it pained me not to?
Tay Johnson.
Yes, Tay Johnson. That's my guy.
Will he be in tomorrow's story, I'm guessing?
He sure is. Okay. Well, beyond that, there is we're not up to 25 recruits yet, are we? Or are we? What's the number on after getting 3 wide receivers in 3 days over the weekend for Notre Dame?
Yes, it is 25 commitments. Notre Dame has 25 commitments in this 2026 class.
And where does that put Notre Dame in the team rankings right now?
Notre Dame is 4th in the country in the On3 industry rankings, behind USC, Georgia, and Texas A&M.
Okay, so why don't you give us a play-by-play of what happened on July 4th, 5th, and 6th and then we'll get into some specifics of those.
Yeah, I just want to know, like, referencing rankings and ratings right now is a little bit confusing, because Rivals and On3, the two systems are being merged together. The previous On3 rankings team will be producing a ratings and rankings that will be branded as Rivals, and so essentially the old Rivals rankings will be phased out. So for right now, the On3 ones are Rivals. It's a bit confusing, and I know it is, and so bear with me as I explain this. But
I'm glad that's your realm.
For the sake of this discussion, I will include when I'm talking about these three receivers what they were ranked as on 3, and then later this month that will be updated. My understanding is the rankings have been updated, but they have to do some work in terms of being able to present them and the work that goes into making the industry rankings, which combines the rankings from other recruiting services across the industry. So hence the name. So there were three guys that were committed on Friday, Saturday, Sunday in this order. Kadon Finley, he's a 4-star recruit, ranked number 17 at wide receiver and number 120 overall, according to On3. Devin Fitzgerald is a 3-star recruit, ranked number 150 at receiver, and Braden Robinson is a 3-star recruit, ranked number 77 at receiver. So,
but they're ranked higher in the old Rivals rankings.
Yes, Rivals has all three of those guys as 4-star recruits. Okay. Rivals was slightly higher on a number of those guys and lower on some others. There's different guys like Kari Adams, for instance, the cornerback commit on 3 has been higher on him than Rivals had been. So I'm interested to see when the rankings are merged as a Rivals brand, what movement there is, how any disagreements are settled and where things fall with those guys, especially these guys that have different star ratings. So I think those are always the most interesting to me, because there does seem to be such a big difference in opinion when you talk about a 3-star recruit and a 4-star recruit. There is a gap between those guys.
Okay, so as far as those three players, there were 2 wide receivers in the class already, Bubba Frazier and Dylan Faison. So which of those players do you feel could provide early impact?
I think Kadon Finley is the only one I feel confident in definitely being able to contribute early. I just think he's the most well-rounded. He can play physically, make contested catches. He has good speed. I think he, of the group, is the most complete package. That's why he's ranked the highest. So that's not necessarily a hot take by me in naming him first. If you made me pick a second one, I would go with Bubba Frazier. I like him, even though he's a bit undersized. His speed is good. Both him and Robinson have very good speed. Devin Fitzgerald is someone who really broke out is as a junior at Phoenix Brophy Prep. So maybe he's going to continue to increase his level of play at a higher rate than has been seen so far in his high school career. So I wouldn't want to rule him out. But Finley's the number one guy for sure. And then I would put Frazier second, and then maybe Fitzgerald third.
And then does that mean Kadon Finley is the guy with the highest ceiling, or do you think one of those other guys might develop into the maybe more long-term best prospect?
Yes, I believe that Finley has the highest ceiling, just for like those things I said. He's the most well-rounded. Certainly when you have speed like Robinson and Frazier do, like it's intriguing. There can be smaller guys that can succeed at the college level and even the pro level with that kind of speed. So I think there's more that goes into it than just that speed. So if they can fully form into a developed receiver, there's a potential that maybe they have higher ceilings from that. But Finley, to me, like I don't think you have to squint very hard to imagine Finley as being the best receiver of these 5.
One of the really cool parts about us joining Blue and Gold is we have a bigger staff, and we can get to a lot of the stuff that we like to do that we're good at, that are in our wheelhouse. And one of the things Tyler does really well is film study. So when you were doing film study, you did a film study of each of these 3 receivers. You're going to go back through the catalog and get the other guys eventually here. But with these three receivers, what stuck out in each one that intrigued you?
Yeah, like I mentioned, Finley, whatever you want him to do, he seemingly can do. He can catch a pass short and make yards after the catch. He can run by someone on a deep ball. He makes contested catches look easier than they should be. So I just think that there's a lot to like in his gameplay.
Well, then if I'm making you repeat what you just said, let me ask you this. How would you compare those guys to what Notre Dame already has on the roster?
I think there's improvements there. It's tough because when you talk about a guy like Malachi Fields, we're talking about a very veteran player who's gone through the process at Virginia, and there's very high expectations for him. So, can these guys be better than Malachi Fields? Yeah, maybe. Obviously, like I've said, Finley would be the one that I would feel the most confident in being that. I think Finley is somewhat similar to Jaden Greathouse out of high school in that there's just something about the way they play in the slot that I think works well for them. And so I'm curious where Finley ends up positionally at wide receiver at the next level. I think he can do anything that you ask him, and maybe his position is based off of where else you feel like. Do you need if you have a bunch of slot receivers, then maybe you put him somewhere else, because I feel like that's one of my concerns about what Notre Dame has in this class and on its roster is that it feels very slot heavy with the number of guys that have recently signed or will sign in the future. So I like this class overall. I think there's different pieces that I think could fit well together. Robinson and Frazier feel a little bit similar to me. I like Frazier a little bit more than Robinson. And so is there some redundancy there? We'll see. I mean, I think as long as you have guys that can contribute, you can, and you have faith in, you can rotate these guys in Notre Dame. That doesn't have to be a 3 or 4 wide receivers only seeing the field or making impacts on the team. So I think you need to take some chances on guys, which I think Notre Dame's doing as well.
All right. So what's coming up next the rest of July with recruiting? What's on the horizon here? At least let's start with this week. Is there anything we need to be paying attention to this week?
Yeah. So on Friday, safety Nick Reddish, a 3-star recruit from Charlotte Independence, will make his commitment announcement. Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Indiana, and Wisconsin are his 4 finalists. And as we've seen of late, guys who are scheduling commitment announcements and have Notre Dame as finalists, a lot of those guys are picking Notre Dame. So I like Notre Dame's chances here. We'll see if they can continue their hot streak with guys who have set up announcements. But Reddish has been someone that Notre Dame has been after for quite some time. And could be a safety, could be a nickelback. Be interesting to see what his college development looks like. But Notre Dame's considered the favorite there.
Okay, we had future casts when we were with Inside ND Sports. It's RPMs now. Do you have an RPM license, or is that? I don't. They would never trust me with that.
I honestly don't know.
I have a Ouija board.
I haven't tried to make a recruiting prediction machine. That's what RPM stands for. I have not tried to make a pick yet. So I'm not sure if I have that power. I would imagine I do, and if I don't, I will riot. No, I'm kidding. I think I have that power, but I have not wielded it yet. So I was joking that when are they going to count all the future casts that I got right? Like I predicted those 3 receivers. No, I didn't get future cast credit for those guys. So, but joking aside, I do think I have that power. So I would put one in for Reddish. The other announcement that's coming later this month from a Notre Dame target is Elijah Golden. That's coming July 26th. I did not put a future cast in for him previously. I probably am in a spot where I would put a prediction in for him in favor of Notre Dame in the recruiting prediction machine. He's rated as a 3-star recruit by On3 and a 4-star recruit by Rivals out of Cardinal Mooney High School in Florida, and his 4 finalists are Notre Dame, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Virginia Tech. I do think it's a tough battle there. Alabama's fighting. Oklahoma, Virginia Tech aren't giving up, but I do think Notre Dame's hot right now, and I think it's a place where Elijah Golden has spent a lot of time on visits, and I think he may follow through with committing to the Irish at the end of the month.
How important would it be for Notre Dame to get him, and do they have any alternatives if they swung and missed?
There's not really any alternative. So yeah, that plays a big role into why he's so important. It would complete a 4-man defensive line class with guys that have pretty easily foreseeable futures in terms of their positions, with Tiki Hola as more of a nose tackle and Elijah Golden as more of a 3 technique. And then you have your edge guys with Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Iwatade. So they really want him a lot. They focused all their energy on him. If they don't get him, they'll have to figure out another plan. There were a number of guys that in the spring Notre Dame was kicking the tires on that they didn't follow through with in terms of hosting for official visits. So I think even if those guys have committed somewhere else, Notre Dame could sort of revisit. You could maybe try to double back with Alistair Vallejo, who committed to Michigan over Notre Dame. I think there's a number of directions Notre Dame could go if it wants to, if it needs to, based on Golden's decision.
So after Golden, let's say they get both of those guys, and that puts Notre Dame at 27. Remember, the 25 limit is gone. The 85 scholarship limit is gone. Notre Dame can have a roster of up to 105 players. They're going to aim for 95 scholarships, but they certainly can compensate the other 10 on the roster. But is Notre Dame done after Elijah Golden? Do they sit back and babysit the guys that they have until the December signing period, or do they go out and continue to look for other players to maybe late risers to add to the class at a certain position?
I think the majority of the energy will be spent on making sure that Notre Dame can keep its class together. It has a lot of talented players who made some tough choices that I'm sure will be getting pursued by other schools despite their commitments to Notre Dame. So that a lot of the energy, I think, will need to be put towards that, because if, say, Reddish and Golden commit, that puts Notre Dame at 27 commitments. You're probably not getting past 30. That seems like a lot, but when Notre Dame is hot in the way they are, it feels like, well, should we use this in a way to continue to sort of better the roster? I think I would personally say it's too soon to tell, because we're dealing with different people than we did in the past. Like, I think under Chad Bowden, Notre Dame would continue to pursue other options and be very aggressive and not worry about what people think of that. Will that be different under Mike Martin and Carter Allman? I'm not certain yet. I do think it would make sense to start having some conversations maybe this month and into August about guys that you think may be worth making a spot for. Maybe they get on campus for a game in September. To me, the most obvious positions would be defensive line, because there was a willingness to go beyond 4 in the class previously, or linebacker, which again, there was also a willingness to go beyond 2. They had room for 3 previously, and then once sort of their last 2 targets left in the class were leading elsewhere, decided to not pursue any others. So I think they could double back and change their minds on whether it's guys that are committed somewhere, maybe guys that are having maybe they were more questionable on previously and have stellar starts to their senior seasons in high school. So it's hard to imagine that just nothing happens for the next until December for the last 5 months of the year. But it would not, based on how many commitments Notre Dame has, it would not be terribly surprising if that's what happened, if that was the 27 who signed it. I think getting all 27 of those guys to sign isn't necessarily going to be easy, but they've done a lot of the work already. It's going to be time to move the focus to the 2027 class.
Well, I've got a couple more questions, but I'd rather jump over into the question portal. So do we have some good ones that we want to get to before we close out?
Yeah, Scott Fegan says, do you see Notre Dame possibly turning a recruit or 2 from other teams? And if so, what position would they go after? I just mentioned the positions that I thought made the most sense with defensive line or linebacker. Certainly that could change based on the strength of the commitments in Notre Dame's class. Like if they feel like there's some guys that are wanting to make visits or don't feel strongly tied to their verbal commitment, maybe that informs the position, the positions they decide to recruit some more guys at. So yeah, I think it's possible. I don't think it's a necessity because of the way Notre Dame's filled its class and the needs that it has addressed. So I think Notre Dame's going to be in a strong position going into the football season in terms of what it needs to do to wrap up its 2026 class. Eric Swope, get a nice plug. If any of you guys haven't picked up the latest issue of Blue and Gold Football Annual, I would suggest you do so. It's a terrific issue for those of us locally. It's at the Hams bookstore. Blue and Gold does an annual preview magazine. We used to do one of those back in our South Bend Tribune days. And Blue and Gold Illustrated is definitely very good. So if you're interested in that, I believe Blue and Gold, let me type this in before I give out the URL. That didn't work. So it's a good thing I didn't say that. But I think you can find a link to that. If you go to blueandgold.com, there should be information available in terms of finding that. The possibility of ordering one if you're not, and if you're not in the area, and pick one up at a local bookstore like Eric mentioned. All right. I think Irish fan said, how many more recruits might they be looking to add? So yeah, like I said, if there's 27, I think they could go to 28 or 29, maybe 30. I wouldn't. More than 30 seems crazy to me. And honestly, 30 is a pretty high number. But when you want to be rooted in high school recruiting, like as Marcus Freeman has said, like they want to build the program through the high school ranks, not the transfer portal ranks. If you're gonna go heavy somewhere, it would be in recruiting when you're hot and you feel like you can get some talented guys, because you're probably going to lose some. There will be attrition, even though Notre Dame does a pretty good job of holding on to its players once they enroll, because so many of them want to graduate. But I think Notre Dame should be in a good position to handle that moving forward. Jeff Stevens.
Me. Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Besides scheduling Rice for next year, any news on the USC scheduling?
There's nothing new at this point, Jeff. I've got a request in to talk to Pete Bavacqua. Now, whether that will be granted as a one-on-one, as a small group, as a press conference, or ignored and kicked down the road till November, I'm not sure. But that is definitely on my to-do list this month, and that's one of the topics that we would get to.
Yeah, and I think like if there is news, that's something that's going to be hard to keep quiet because there's so much passion as it relates to the USC news. So if there were news out there, you'd probably already know about it. All right, I think that's it on questions, Eric.
Okay, so Notre Dame has one commitment already in the 2027 class, Sean Kraft, a long snapper. Are any of the other prospects that have visited, is anybody anywhere close to decision mode or has some kind of timeline that you know of?
I don't think so. I don't get the sense that a lot of guys are trying to hurry up and make a decision before their junior seasons. I think the reason we see so many guys commit during the summer as going into their senior years is because they would like to be able to just focus on their final season of high school football and have recruiting sort of out of the way. But yeah, Ellis McGaskian, the linebacker who did commit to Notre Dame, I would say that was a little bit out of nowhere. He visited for Irish Invasion and sort of just felt like it was time for him to make a decision and wanted to do that. So I'm not saying there's definitely not going to be a 2027 recruit who makes a choice before the end of July, but there's no one that's at least publicly acknowledged that they intend to make decisions coming up here soon.
What do you think about there's some forecasts already for Peyton Houston, one of the two quarterbacks that Notre Dame has offered in the 2027 class. Looks like he's starting to lean into USC. What do you think about that development?
Yeah, that's not surprising. That I felt like USC was in a good spot after talking to him, and actually did a interview with Peyton alongside Matt Moreno, who does some recruiting coverage for Pac-12 schools, including or I guess not USC, but USC was included in that when he was helping out with Pac-12, and so I think that's just continued as USC is a Big Ten school. So that's funny. I hadn't really thought about that until I said that out loud. So yeah, I was listening to him ask questions about USC and the answers he was giving, and USC is leaning very hard into a Lincoln Riley coached Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray is someone that Peyton Houston looks up to. Is not the tallest quarterback. He's on the shorter side. Peyton Houston is, like Kyler Murray is. So he definitely digs that comparison. Kyler Murray is someone who he looks up to. So I think that has really played well for Peyton Houston. And I think he described himself as having two goals as it relates to his football career, and that is winning the Heisman Trophy and becoming a Hall of Famer. So he mentioned how Lincoln Riley has done a good job of producing Heisman Trophy winners. So I think you could understand why he may be someone who people could see ending up at USC.
And then when these guys have been announcing, it feels like you say, well, Notre Dame is such and such position in the top 10. And 2 hours later, that's outdated because there's so much jostling going on right now between teams.
Everyone's making decisions. Yeah.
So my thought is two-part question. One is, do you think Notre Dame will end up being in the top 5 when all is said and done? And the second part of that is there much difference between being number 4 and being number 8 with how close all this is?
Yeah, I need to study more how the On3 and what we branded as rivals team rankings work, to have a better grasp on that. I would feel more confident in terms of the rival stuff. And because all of this is changing, it feels like I'm talking about outdated stuff. I think it's worth noting that On3's own ranking system is designed to not put as much weight into classes that are have started to fill up sooner. So like in the old rival system, they would take your top 20 commitments. So if you got to 20 while someone else is at 16, you were at an advantage in theory in terms of your rival's team ranking. For the On3 one, for instance, right now I believe they're using the average number of commits used in the ranking score is 17. So it's supposed to be more predictive or in terms of how it's going to end up, because it's not overvaluing maybe teams that have recruited ahead like Notre Dame. Even though if you look at the top 4 schools, USC is number 1, they have 31. Georgia is 2, they have 27. Texas A&M is 24 at number 3. Alabama's 5th with 19. So Alabama's the only one that high up with less than 20. But so I mean, I think it's possible. I think it's Notre Dame has so consistently fallen short in that sort of standard everyone wants to use in terms of being a top 5 recruiting class that I would say the odds would say no, just because it hasn't really worked out that way. I think the biggest thing in Notre Dame's favor, which obviously if you think about it, it makes sense. Like I do think there are some guys that aren't necessarily 5-star recruits now, but could become 5-star recruits in these last months of the recruiting cycle. And that's what you need in order to really be a top 5 recruiting class. You have to have multiple 5-star recruits, not just one, which is usually what Notre Dame is trying to get, just one. Or not, I mean, obviously they're trying to get more, but usually one is a victory. When to be in the top 5, you need to have 2 or 3 at least. So I think there's a chance that Notre Dame could end up with that based on some of the feedback I've heard about how the rankings makers and ratings folks feel about Notre Dame's commits. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, does it matter if you're top 5 or 8th? Probably not. I mean, top 10, if you can get into the top 10 consistently, I think that's probably going to be good enough as long as you have the right development and make the right transfer portal additions. with a good coaching staff, like I think that puts you in position to potentially win a national championship. Obviously, if you can be in the top 5 every year consistently, that's only going to increase because you're just bringing in more talent. And so even when you miss on guys, you have other guys that maybe are right there that can step in, and you don't really feel the difference of the miss. And I think Notre Dame has felt the differences in the past of like, okay, this guy didn't pan out. He was supposed to be one of our best recruits. And maybe because they didn't have as many sort of grouped together in the top 100 or in the 5-star category in the past, where I feel like this class could have a high concentration towards that higher end.
All right. Well, Tyler, you're a 5-star recruiting guy, as are Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly. You guys did a great job this weekend while we all kind of watched gaping and enjoyed the recruiting coverage. And thanks to everybody for all your questions, comments, compliments, quips, and Eric Swope for your sales pitch. I love it. You can be part of our marketing team, and we hope to see you all on next week's Football Never Sleeps. Tyler, you got anything good left?
No, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Like we mentioned earlier, Hansen and James is the handle. Notre Dame Football with Eric Hansen and Tyler James is the new name, but same product. Just make sure you're subscribed to us here. You'll still get our content. You'll see these live shows every week, and we'll see you next week.
And we're going to have video footage of Tyler killing a spider next week.
Yeah, I'll do dual cameras so you can see the front and the back. But then you're going to see all my notes and see how much of a rookie I am that I need to have notes in front of me. I can't just rattle off the rankings of all those players. All right, everyone. Have a good one.